I have found, have you ever seen the movie The Interview with
Yes.
with God dang it, like Seth
Yeah.
Rogen
Yes.
and
Yep. They're going to interview North Korea guy.
and remember he's like literally giving the interview with like Eminem in the beginning, and
Yeah.
Eminem drops something on him. He's like, "What? What?" He's like, "Stop." I have had podcasts with people where they have shared something, and I'm like, "That's bananas." It's like I didn't even know you, right? Or they have something crazy in their story. Like, I feel like I don't even know you right now as you're telling me. I knew that you used to be a dancer for Thunder from Down Under. I forget your stage name. You told me about it in your relationship to Joe Rogan. There was something there with your guys', you had the same barber. But I mean, honestly, why don't you actually begin at the beginning? Like, share your story for those that don't know you because you're new to this industry. And I think that that's one of the reasons why I wanted you on this podcast is the industry has, as you know, massive demand for talent. And I believe that there's a lot of people that are talented that don't sit within this industry that can bring whatever they come from the other industry in, which will add more. It's really the D&I model, right? It's the diversity and inclusion, but the more introductions of ideas that come from outside the industry, the more dynamic the industry becomes. So my thing is, I remember when we were looking for a new chief strategy officer, I was like, I need someone. At first, I just defaulted to like, I need someone that knows the industry and people know they have credibility and everybody understands. And then I was like, wait a second. That's not what I need as an optical CSO. I need someone who could actually come in and be like, why do you guys do this? Have no general knowledge and idea of standard practices or best industry indicative practices in our space and be like, okay, so that's why everybody does that? Well, why? Why don't we do something? And you've already introduced a lot of ideas that we are like, it seems like it should have been obvious to us. It's sitting at the front of our brains, but we all get kind of defaulted into these comforted, models where we're just kind of trying to fall in line with the rest of the herd and try to be at the front of that herd in a very homogenous approach to market, so to speak. And now I'm like drawing myself out of those parallels and trying to figure out, like, instead of trying to do more of the same, how do I just do more of things massively different? Because that's more disruptive and it allows us to differentiate ourselves. And then it allows us to rediscover better ways, be it or means, better methods. So I remember sitting down with people and like, wait a second, you're going to hire a dude who is going to come in and be one of the most important people for your business and they have no data center experience. I'm like, yes, but just hear me out first, right? So there's people that are going to be listening to you talk today and they have no idea who you are. So why don't you start at the beginning and introduce yourself? And we'll go back to, where it all started, I guess, and then how you ended up coming over here with us. So,
awesome. Great.
So introduce yourself.
So Joe Pinzon, not to confuse
you
with
should Google that.
Joe Rogan.
No, they should Google.
Go to josephpinzon.com. I like to dabble with the silks a little bit.
That's right.
That's not me, so you'll see quickly. But yeah, I mean, Kirk, bring up a great point. So, what's interesting is I've always, since I was a kid, looked at everything that has happened or anything I can do, and how could it be done better, and not in a ego way, because ego is not your amigo. But in a way that, in a way that it would improve a situation. And I think it goes back to, my childhood. So, my childhood would not necessarily equate to the ingredients to make the most successful business person in the future. So,
interesting.
And I'll kind of go through that. So if you fast forward to formal training, I have an MBA. You can learn all of this, but unless you have the certain ingredients, the resilience, the ability to adapt, you cannot really apply that. You just become a normal director of a business and without any ability to grow it past, or have the ability to grow it past what your knowledge base can afford you, or the risk that you're willing to take. So I look at it from the standpoint of my childhood, and which was unique. Growing up in Chicago, in the city of Chicago, not the suburbs of Chicago. My dad being a cop. Chicago.
Oh, yeah, your dad was a popo.
Yes, 99% of the people, if they're from Chicago, but they're an hour from outside the city. It's quite interesting. So we were born and raised in the city. And early on at a young age, very young age, I think I was in 3rd grade, my parents got a divorce. Being Roman Catholic, Italian people, you don't get a divorce in Chicago. The minute you get a divorce in Chicago, you're almost a charity case because you've got split parents. They're living in 2 different places in the city, and you're doing visitation, and everyone else, the Irish, we're a very ethnically divided city. We're not prejudiced. We're just less tolerant of the races that we participate in. So you live in an Italian community, you live in an Irish community, just because if you're going to come from Ireland, you want to have comfort and familiarity to your foods and your culture. If you come from Italy, if you come from Poland, shoot. But we actually moved to a Polish neighborhood. I had some Polish friends from Katy, Texas, would have me go back to Chicago just to get the mayonnaise. So it's quite interesting. But so that's how Chicago is divided, and that's how it's created. So when we got a divorce, we actually moved to an Irish community, and they were awesome. They kind of took us in. We would live predominantly with my mom, but it was very unique because
Who's we? You have brothers and sisters?
My brother, my sister. I had an older brother and a younger sister, and Chicago is different. So I would never, when we evolved, okay, and we started working, and we have a career, and we have kids, and we have our own family. I remember buying my daughters really nice bikes, and they would drive their bikes to school, and I would make them chain their bikes at the school. And our daughters were like, "What the heck, Dad?" No one in Katy, Texas had their bikes chained up.
For real.
Because they just parked the bike and
Different
no one would
neighborhood,
get
yeah.
stolen. Chicago was a little bit different in the sense that you had to keep an eye out. You had to be aware.
They'll just take your seat.
But we were everywhere. I mean, my God, we would go to school. We would come home. There was no cell phones. Parents would have no idea if we were home or not. Parents, my mom would work till 7 o'clock at night. She owned a beauty shop, and my dad was a Chicago cop. You just didn't have access to seeing what your kids were doing. I was in 3rd grade, so that made my sister was like in preschool, and I would go get her from daycare, sign her out, and walk her home in the city of Chicago. And my brother was older, so he would, he wanted to be in a rock band, so he was doing what he needed to do. But that creates the dynamic of survival at the resilience of that very young age. And that just continues and extends on. I mean, I remember playing baseball, sandlot baseball. We call it sandlot. It was actually in parking lots of the Lutheran church by our school, our home. And we would say, forget about this. Let's just go to the lake, which you get on 4 or 5 buses. All of a sudden you're at Lake Michigan. You're 30 minutes from your house and you're in the 5th grade.
That's crazy.
I mean, you're on the bus with commuters and people. I mean, it's unbelievable. We would never allow our kids to do this today.
No.
Rightfully so. I mean, that was probably, but when I tell these stories, my parents get all upset saying, "You frame this up as we're bad parents." I said, no. All the parents allowed it. It was like there wasn't a kid that wasn't allowed.
I think our age generation, I'm in my late 40s, you're probably around the same. And I think that it wasn't unusual for us to leave in the morning and then come back at supper time.
Right.
And no one knew where you were.
Right.
Right. So, and I mean, I did that while living on military bases, but I also did it when my dad moved off military bases. So I get it. I mean, that was just a different time. You're right. I would never let my kids do the things that I was doing.
Right.
Not a chance.
Right. So it's quite interesting. And the one thing that I could say about Chicago is, and then my parents specifically, they ensured that we went to the proper school system. You got the Chicago public school system. Not going to say anything bad about that, but you couldn't go. I mean, you really limit your opportunities. So you would go to the Catholic school system. So went to an all-boys high school and so forth, Catholic grammar school. So did my brother. And what's interesting about Chicago is you don't go like today, all 3 kids, you live in the same area, you go to the same high school. You go to the high school based upon what you're good at. So if you're a science guy, you go to Gordon Tech at the time. If you were a baseball player, you go to St. Pat's. So I went to St. Pat's. My brother went to Gordon.
Interesting.
And my sister went to a completely different high school. And so you had to figure a way to get to those schools.
Were
that
they all
were
about equal distance away from each other?
No,
or-
they were all in completely different sides of the city. It was quite amazing.
Interesting.
Yeah. So right off the bat, as a imagine the anxiety as a high school student that your daughters have had, or your daughters had, and your sons and my kids have had, of that's consistent, going to the same school, being part of the family. Imagine like you're going to a whole different school, different part of the city, different teaching systems. It's quite interesting. So as you develop, in the city, you become part of your environment, your orbit in Chicago. It's very difficult when you're in the city of Chicago to expect anything more than, for example, if someone asked me, would I be a C-suite of any sort? Would I be a strategic leader of a sales operation at the age of 15, 17, 22? I would say no. When I got my first sales job, I remember my dad asking, how are the bennies? That's Chicago talk for, I don't care how much you make. Do they pay for your dental?
Oh, gotcha.
So, I mean, it's a very blue collar environment. And so when I would say things like, I don't care about that, I care about the career trajectory and those were foreign concepts. So, you read the book Rich Dad Poor Dad, so you understand what you don't know because you didn't understand, you didn't grow up rich. Same thing from a development standpoint of your education and also your career base. Speaking to your parents who can't teach you of what that would look like because they probably have never met an executive up to that point in their life. So it is quite interesting. But really, when I started to get older,
were you a bad kid? Let me ask you that. Would you not have seen yourself in the C-suite because you were like I was pressure testing the limits my entire life, right? So I could see how people were like, I could be talking to Kirk through a glass window with a phone next to my hand, with our hands touching one day. I was telling, I did a podcast with Jared once. I'm like, I did win awards when I was in the military, but I think broke the record for being brought back to the boat zip tied the most, right? But I mean, I never went to mass or any of those things, but I think as a junior sailor, you're expected to just make meathead decisions. But for you, were you a rambunctious, type of kid that's why you're like, I'm going to be tied up? Or because you, in your mind at that time, were like, don't know how smart you have to be in that role? What is it that self-imposed this? Like, I probably won't be that,
So, there was never someone inspirational for you to. So for me personally, there was no one inspirational to say I would like to be like Mike, right? So they're like
a role model.
Yeah, there really wasn't a role model out there. So that was really what held us back from a behavioral standpoint. What's interesting is I think if you're a cop kid, all the cops treat their kids like they're Jack Bauer. The fact is we don't like their methods, but they actually garnish some good results. So, for example, I was more afraid of my dad finding out I did something wrong than a cop, I would say, put me in jail. So when I do something like, for example, I was peeing in the alley, something stupid I shouldn't have done, but Chicago people don't like that. So I'm peeing in the alley.
How old are you?
I was a sophomore in high school. Yeah,
Okay.
sophomore in high school, peeing in the alley, and an unmarked car comes speeding down the alley. And I'm like, oh, shit, here we go. Guy gets out of the car, is like, what, Chicago talk is F, 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 F. So, what the F are you doing? Blah, blah, blah. And of course, I'm not going to say, sir, I'm really apologize. Look at my hands. I'm like, what do you think I'm effing doing here? What's in my hand here? So we were not respectful to each, but that was just how we spoke to each other. And I could, the guy looked at me and he hit me in the legs as hard as he could with this billy club.
Oh.
And I was like, well, that hurt. And then, and he said, and I said, hey, he goes, who are you? Blah, blah, blah. I said, I'm Joey Pinzon. I was Joey then. So you evolve in Chicago, by the way. You grow up Joey. You then move to Joe in college, and then you become Joe. Then you become Joseph because you've got to have the professional name because you don't want to be Joe the plumber. So I was Joey. So it's Joey Pinzon. And so, hey, I'm like this. Hey, I'm Joey Pinzon. I'm, Officer Pinzon's kid. And they were like, oh, yeah? Okay.
Ooh.
And I'm going to tell your dad. So in that
Oh,
point, I was like,
snaps.
shit, I'd rather take another hit in the legs. So I had to go confront my dad. And I remember in that incident, what was crazy was my dad was a disciplinary, but no one screwed with anyone's cops' kids. I remember my dad showing up at that guy's precinct, dragging him
the
in
guy
out of the
hit you.
and he hit me, grabbing that guy out of the precinct, pulling him out into the street in front of me and giving him a beating in front of me. I remember that. I remember my dad, we went the occasional family trip, me and my sister was never included. My family was very, oldest brother was the king. He was next in line. It was very old school. And I was second, my poor sister. So we try to show her favor today. But it would just, my dad said, let's go ride bikes. So it was me and my brother were riding a bike. This guy opens the door and he hits me and I fall off the bike. The guy looks at me, kind of laughs and walks away. And my dad this is probably early 80s. My dad's driving away. He comes back and he's like, what the F's wrong with you? Why'd you fall off the bike? I go, this guy just knocked me off my bike with his car door. And he goes, did he say anything? Now you got to understand, let me paint a picture for my dad. He looks like, this is Tom Selleck, Magnum PI days. The shorts were very short. This was
Nice.
NBA 1984, okay? So
Back in style, actually.
very short shorts, terry cloth shirt with the little zipper on the button. And he's wearing a ankle gun, snub
Nice.
nose, with a pair of sneakers, okay? And so you could see the gun a mile away. The guy who hits me with the car ran into the bank. My dad runs into the bank with his gun out. Now, there's a security guard at the thing. He's flashing the badge. He brings that guy out, brings him back over to his car, asked him what happened, and then gave that guy a beating right in front of me. So the parenting was very unique.
I like the word unique.
Probably should not be represented in today's parenting.
But for me, that have never been to Chicago and only seen Chicago movies, I'm like, that's what I expect it to be. I expect it to be gritty like that.
It really is, and I'm not embellishing. These are these are crazy development stories, but this is what goes to, you witness this as a kid. It doesn't create trauma. It creates a resilience. It creates a pragmatic approach to life. There's no gray. It's you harm, you get hurt. And, again, I'm not saying that's good or bad or indifferent, but
that's what you learn.
I have to assume it's what shaped me into who I am today. But as I started to progress, it was really interesting. And this really kind of gets centered around my dad. I remember when I got I'll come back to that when I got my first job in sales and how he reacted to that. But while I was in college, so freshman year in college.
And you're playing baseball in college?
I'm playing baseball and enjoying life, and actually had to join the military, join ROTC through that process. And that actually kind of saved my life because it forced me to have to wake up at 6 a.m. I joined a fraternity, and without that, I would be an idiot.
Sure.
So really, I attribute the military is keeping me on track to actually succeed. I think everyone needs some level of discipline. These kids, up to them, they'll wake up at noon, they'll miss all the classes. So, but I'm dealing with that today, by the way.
Yeah, take a number. I get you.
So I remember my dad. He was responsible in his district, which is 13th district in Shakespeare, for liquor licenses. And Chicago's a unique city. It's old school. Like, for example, O'Hare, the security is not run by TSA or the federal government. It's run by Chicago Police Department.
Interesting.
The highway systems that usually should be governed by the state police, Chicago Police. So they can get the money, they can write the tickets, and they can own the jurisdiction. Same thing with liquor licenses. It's not some specific, it's the district responsibility. And, you're giving certain people a lot of power. The money made in restaurants are not from food, it's made from liquor licenses. So I'm not going to implicate anyone, but I'm going to tell you that my dad created a process that allowed for to ensure that cops would be involved undercover in providing security after hours to these restaurants that would have liquor licenses, and a civilian, which would be me, would be responsible for for collecting the money from the owner and then handing it out to the
I've
cops.
seen this movie before.
And I don't know if they pay taxes on this, and I'm not going to say
I get it.
that they did or they didn't. I'm assuming that they were all good tax-paying citizens, and they accounted for that revenue. But I would come in from Southern Illinois, which is 6 hours away, and I would come in for the weekends to administer this solution for my father. And and it was crazy is there were so many, as I stated earlier, so many dangers. You go up to the lake, you're out running on the city. Never as parents did they ever think, oh my God, they're like we think today.
I'm a
There's
grown-ass man,
harm.
and I'm worried to walk down the streets of Chicago.
Yeah.
And I've been in some shit.
Exactly. And you're and your parents are, there's just like everything's going to be okay. So I remember, and I'm going to throw a shout out here to Steve Wilco. So Steve Wilco is Steve, who is the security guard, or was the security guard for the Jerry Springer show.
Oh yeah.
Well, Steve was
taller version of you. Same haircut.
Exactly. Interesting cat.
That was your friend.
He was a
growing up?
Marine. He was a Marine, and he wasn't my friend. He was an older guy, but he was a Marine, and he was a Chicago cop. And a lot of Chicago police get opportunities. Like my buddy next door, Joey Farina. It was Dennis Farina's son. Dennis was in several movies, a popular actor, was in tons of Miami Vice.
Italian guy.
He was in The Thief. He got his show. And the way it happens is Chicago cops say, if you're going to run a movie here, I want to have cops on the set to provide security. And they need stand-in and they need cops. So a lot of Steven Seagal movies, all those guys are Chicago cops that were done in Chicago.
Was your dad in any of those movies?
My dad was never in those movies. However, he got me an audition for The Shining. I came runner-up I would have been the Shining kid, and probably not speaking today because I'd be messed up. That kid's messed up.
Oh,
but
really?
yeah, I actually had an audition for The Shining. So they I'm not gonna say they do take advantage of their opportunities in the city.
Yeah.
They utilize their resources. So Steve, same way. Jerry Springer was getting some heat. They didn't put Chicago cops on the stage because people are beating the hell out of each other through a dysfunctional approach.
Every show.
And so they put Steve on there. But before Steve used to be one of the guys in the district that we would use as our undercover, not our undercover, but our plainclothes copper that would work the evening, make a little extra cash. And so one night we were at a nightclub, Cuban nightclub. Two characters come, and I was responsible for letting. I also worked some of these opportunities. So this particular place was a Cuban nightclub, and I was responsible for letting people in. A little bit late hours. Chicago bars can stay open to 5, 6, 7 o'clock in the morning. It's quite unique. And so it was probably 2 o'clock in the morning. These guys come walking in. They looked a little bit unsavory. They looked like they shouldn't have come in, but they promised me everything was going to be okay. Lo and behold, 5 minutes later, I see a chair fly across the floor. And it's these guys causing some trouble. I have to run in. I got to get Steve. We're throwing these guys out. All of a sudden, there's girlfriends of theirs that we didn't know were inside the place. We're jumping on Steve and my back, trying to make us stop. And we're just trying to get these guys out of this club. What was very unique about this situation were these guys were obviously on some type of drug. We didn't know what they were on, but they were pretty hopped up. And I really felt like they were going to cause some significant trouble. They were pounding on the window, and I was outside with these guys, and I had a mag light. And I remember that I turned to the side to look at Steve. Steve, in Chicago, you have the vestibule. You have this area in the middle between the main door and the secondary door, and heat's blowing up, so you don't lose any heat from the inside. This was during the winter time when this incident happened. So Steve's in that kind of middle area, and I'm outside, and I'm not paying attention. And all of a sudden, I look and I see literally an arm come up, and I was about to get punched really hard in the face. I was like, "Oh, this is going to really hurt." But before you know it, Steve, my hero, opens the door slightly and knocks this guy out. Knocks this guy out so hard that he doesn't move, and I'm like, "Oh my God,
I've seen those.
This guy could be dead." He didn't die, but I said to my dad, "Hey, listen, I think we need to lock these guys up." Because these guys are bad characters, and my dad was at the club. He shouldn't have been, but he was. There's some rules around that. But my dad said no. Now we have this park in his district called Humble Park, and there's Latin Kings and there's different gangs, and depending on who you are, it's Chicago police justice to drop kids off in the park. If they can get through it, it's almost like warriors. If they can get out of the park, that was their punishment. They're going to get hurt pretty bad.
Sure.
And so my dad says, drop them off at the park. So they were dropped off at the park, opposed to going to jail. Now it's later. It's 3:30 in the morning. We're actually 4 o'clock. We're closing the club up. And I'm inside the club, and I'm collecting the headsets, and I'm collecting the other stuff from the other guys, and I have the money to pay them, and I'm shaking the owner's hand. And as I look at the owner, his eyes gets really big. And that was an indication for me that probably there's someone behind me. I have no idea because I locked the doors. I have no idea how this guy got inside the club. And as I turn, it's one of the guys. Now, this guy...
He made it through the park.
He made it through the park, and this guy did not look like the same guy, meaning he was pretty roughed up. He had different clothes on, and he was pretty roughed up. But before I can get my arm around to knock him out with my mag light, because this is just not a good situation, he put 3 shots right into the owner, right around my body.
Oh, wow.
I did not get hit. I was standing right there. I did not get hit. My dad... who is at this time probably, I would say, 18 years on the job, was not probably ready or prepared, but all Chicago cops carry at any given time, 24/7, as I gave you the story around bike riding. The guy's got a gun on his ankle. So he pulls out his 9mm, and he's having a hard time getting it going. So I kind of just walked away. My dad comes circling around, and this guy starts running out. I was like, my God, I'm lucky. Now I already have been to basic training. Okay, so I had some military tactical understanding of this. I need to be able to react under pressure. And what's funny is my dad at the time is an Army reservist, is a command sergeant major. But again, when you're not a practitioner and you're not involved in these things, you kind of lose your luster.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
He's getting a little bit long in the tooth too. So he's not moving well. So I kind of grabbed him and I said, okay, let's, I got behind him. I'm like, high, low. He's missing this guy as he's running out. Finally gets a couple shots into him, one in the back of the arm, one in the back. And then as he's running out of this place, there was a really awesome guy that I loved that was raising his family. He was not from this country, and he was hiding under a table scared half to death. And the bad guy decides to shoot this guy, and he's paralyzed.
Oh, that's horrible.
But yeah, and he's probably dead now because he was in his 60s at the time. So this guy gets shot one more time by my dad through the window, like the movies, laid out in Milwaukee Avenue. Boom, right on the street. I'm like, oh my God, this is crazy. The guy who he came with, who happened to be his brother, decides to drive across the street, drive around to go get him, sees his brother laid out in the street, and my dad's firing. Now, Milwaukee Avenue is like Times Square in Chicago. 3:30 in the morning, there's thousands of people walking around. It's unbelievable. So my dad's firing like he's freaking James Bond at the people the car. And finally he gets what they call trigger freeze. He thinks he has no longer rounds, but his finger froze. He could no longer pull the trigger, which is a condition that happens in trauma or firefights. Sure. So he had this situation where he couldn't trigger. The sergeant immediately came and responded, grabbed the gun out of my dad's hand, noticed that there was 3 more rounds. That at any given time, my dad did not have it on safety and the whole 9 yards.
Sure.
I ran back inside to see what was going on with the owner. The guy was dead. So, you look at this thing and you're like, the movies, there's blood everywhere.
Sure.
No, it was a couple holes in his body and that was it. There's nothing you can really do. So I ran back out to see what was going on. At this time now, squad cars, undercover coppers, were all assembling. And they're kind of standing over the bad guy. And here comes the paramedics. And I come walking up to these guys, and I'm young, and I don't know the protocol or the process. And they're standing around these guys, and they're talking about how the Bears played so miserable
Jesus.
the week prior. They're talking, and this guy's laying out in the street, and they're just circled around him. And the paramedics were like, okay, guys, I got to get to this guy. And I remember specifically, it wasn't Steve, but it was somebody else saying, if you touch this guy, I'll kill you.
Oh, they wanted him to expire.
They wanted him to just expire on the street. And, this went on for about 20 minutes. They sent the paramedics inside to take care of the other people because there were still people. I mean, it was a traumatic situation. And finally the sergeant was like, we got to get this guy going. what's really interesting about this is I remember now being put into a squad car, went to my dad's police district, was now sitting in the locker room by myself. The lieutenant, my actual lieutenant, was my reserve lieutenant that I had duty responsibility with, was a Chicago cop. He showed up, sat down with me, said, "Hey, your dad was picking you up from work, and if he didn't come,
You'd be dead.
I'd be dead, and people's lives would not be saved. He's a hero." That's the story, and walks out. So now it's like 6:30. By the way, the next day, I had reserve duty, and it's already 6 o'clock in the morning.
And you hadn't slept.
I haven't slept. And so I get in front of this board of people, and they're like, "What happened?" And I said, "This guy came in, shot people up. My dad was just so happened there because he picked me up, and he mitigated the threat, and meanwhile, a year later, I think my dad got an award for accommodation for being a hero." But the point being is that it's a crazy story. I mean,
You learn a lot about life.
I probably have PTSD from it, and the reality is you learn resilience. That's the city life, and so how could you, if you're in this orbit, how can you ever expect a world outside of that? How can you ever expect to be a Wharton MBA grad? How can you ever expect to be anything more than someone who just wants to be a fireman or a cop?
Yeah.
So it's quite interesting that, me and my brother is a very high level executive of American Family Insurance. He's been there for quite some time now. And we always talk about how they can never write a business book about us. We're a complete outlier. We're an anomaly. We should not have succeeded. We should not be running business units. We should not be dynamic leaders. Who taught us? Our orbit didn't teach us that. What ended up teaching us is our ability to adapt to the situation and respond, and then take whatever formal training we've had, either through education or through application, and apply that to our business acumen. And that's what's created our ability to succeed. And then there's also the Chicago side of a little bullshit, right? So, you could sell something to somebody that's not as attractive as it necessarily should be. So you take that charisma, you throw that on top of resiliency, you apply that to your formal training, and I think it creates a dynamic leader. But again, not something I would go out and be a mentor to anyone.
Listen, you got to get pressure tests like this. Make sure your dad's here to pick you up from work in case he has to shoot anybody.
Exactly.
But I could see how that, so that makes a lot more sense now as you put it in that context, because I was like, why not you? And it sounds like that whole evolution had a life-changing effect on all of you, where you're like, we don't want to have this life for the rest of our lives. Right. We need to go find a better life. Did it make you, I guess at the time you're in college, you're in ROTC, you're not playing baseball probably at that time. Yep. And now, did that make you be like, okay, I'm not going to just get C's anymore. I need to get better grades. I need to get, where's it like, I need to get the heck out of here. I need to go do something different.
Yeah. That's what it started. But a lot of it is dumb luck. And so I think for me and my brother, we were always, if my mom smoked, we would look at that and say, we're not going to smoke. If my dad acted this certain way, we recognized it and said, we've got to make sure we're not this way when we're parents. And I think it was almost an opposites for him and I. It was quite interesting. Not
Your
that
brother?
My brother, yeah. And not that it was that they were bad parents. It was just, I think we applied that approach to everything that we did. So, if my dad said, "Hey, you don't need college," right? We do need college. If like for example, my first job, it was selling copy machines door to door, and I remember him saying, "Okay, his lesson to me," which to his credit, he was trying to do his best, but he's like, "Listen, in my business, so I can only relate to what I do, which is a cop. We will have roll call in the morning, and we'll have to show the sergeant our ticket books, and." No one had a conversation with each other, but we knew we would only write one ticket book that day. But then a rookie would come in, and he would show the sergeant that he wrote 3.
Oh.
And what the sergeant would do is say, "Okay, since Gomer Pyle over here wrote 3, all of you guys would have to write 3. And my dad said, don't be Gomer Pyle. And I was like, Dad, if I outsell these guys, I make more money and I become their manager. Why? So his approach was, don't be extraordinary. Do not do above and beyond.
Don't stand out. Just
don't
be average.
Stand out. Just stand average. Write out the
Don't get
clock.
the attention.
Exactly. Yeah. And I was like, Dad, this is not going to work in what I do. And me and my brother would talk about that. And we'd say, okay, whatever Dad tells us,
do the
we
opposite.
just got to do the opposite.
Damn.
And again, that was that blue collar Chicago. It's a hard life there. I mean, it's not easy.
Yeah. Was back in those days, was your father trying to encourage you guys to go into law enforcement?
So there was either for me and my brother, it was cop or police. So
or firefighter, you mean?
He
cop or police.
I'm sorry, cop or army. So
gotcha.
Thank you for that. Yeah, there would be no fire. For some reason,
that's why I was like, wow.
It's worse than any branch of the military. A cop and firemen,
like they like to punch each other more than anybody.
The worst example of they hate each other so much. Cops think that firemen are just pansies. It's a whole thing. Yeah. So it was either become a cop or in the army. He that was his desire. So I was the only one that actually joined the army. And so my brother didn't do that at all. He was like, I'm not doing
He's
either
the
of
king.
these
He's
things.
the oldest.
I'm not going to do either of those things. But so that all died. It all ended with me for our family. But when you translate that into, okay, now you how do you practically grow? How do you lead? It's selling. I don't care what it is. I don't care if it's a commodity. I don't care if it's strategic. I don't care if it's an ingredient that makes the best soup on the planet and that soup company needs your ingredient. You have to be resilient. You have to accept no. You have to be in the process to not to acknowledge that you're not going to have great days. You can't lie to yourself. You can't say everything's going to be okay. You have to immediately acknowledge the fact that nothing's going to be okay unless you make it okay. And so that's the Chicago story is, we tend to lie to ourselves when we start a business endeavor. Things will be okay. Hope is a strategy. And it's really not. Okay. So that was, I think, the Chicago, your background around resiliency and the story. And then again, if you could put yourself in a position to lead and then learn the formal tricks of the trade that someone from the Northeast growing up in, Connecticut, that doesn't have to worry about what I had to worry about growing up in the city. And I'm learning what they learn, but I'm taking my practical Chicago city skills into play. I'm going to beat them all day long because it's just, I'm not going to.
Because you had to hustle to survive literally there.
I'm not entitled, and I'm going to ensure that I'm going to succeed, and I'm going to push myself as hard as I possibly can. It gets scary, though, in business, especially working for big business. So right from school, literally worked for Konica Minolta, Japanese equipment manufacturer for 25 years. What gets scary about that is even a guy like me can get complacent because you know exactly how hard you have to work to hit the number to succeed, to grow the business by a nice percentage. And your boss is 3 to 5 years out the door. So, these multinational, multi-billion-dollar companies all have leadership that, they're not here to change the world. So if you're a young person, aggressive, and you want to change the world and you're trying to press this information into a leader who's running the clock out because 4 years from now, they don't care about this company. Mm-hmm. It becomes very difficult. So you, as a young person, you're going to be occupied because you've got a young team, you're being aggressive, you're building your business, you're getting more responsibility, but you get to a certain point where you start to be the guy who may only have 5 to 10 years on the clock.
Interesting.
And that's when I jumped ship and said, what am I doing here?
Well, listen, I want to scratch the pain on that a little bit more, but I want to unpackage a few more things before we go back to that because, as a guy that grows up in an incubator of where the reflection of the world really is based on what you are immersed in real time, not with what you're seeing on TV, I guess. And then you went from that world to two separate worlds, right? You had the Army world, but you had the world outside of Chicago, right? So let me grab us a couple more drinks real quick because I want to unpackage that, because I think that's the part where, what was it like going and taking the world that you're known, like best known in, to a world that is mass? I mean, think about Austin, Texas versus Chicago. It's like the dyslexic version of them, right? So like, how did you go from the whole world lived in this incubator of Chicago? Like, there are people in Chicago, like people in New York, that have never even had a driver's license. Like,
Right.
why do I need
Right.
one? Right. So like, this is home. I'll get on a plane once or twice a year, but this is home, and I live within this. So you went from that whole world to this completely different world, which is all tech and it's international and all that stuff. So you could not have made a bigger shift. It takes an outlier mindset to go from, hey, this is where my family is born and raised. And I mean, like you were saying, like, some people are born there and they'll never leave. They die there just like their parents and all that stuff. And then you're like, all right, so I've seen this, box checked. I have this, went to school. I'm, got this military background too. And now I have this other network of connections. And I know that what Chicago has to offer, what's the rest of the world had to offer.
Right.
From an opportunity perspective and a physical experience of life, right? I mean, like, when I used to have to go to Europe every few weeks on business, right? And I would go for 7 to 10 days at a click. I mean, I literally had a whole nother suitcase with a whole completely different wardrobe because I had been attacked or mugged enough in Europe to where I didn't want to stand out, right? And the question I would get from all these people was like, what's the food like in America? And I'm like, well, think of it like this. I mean, for us, we know that the food that you order in New England is going to be a little bit different than what you get in New Orleans, which is going to be massively different than what you get in like California.
Yeah.
You know, so I'm like, American food is everything, right?
Yeah.
So I think the experiences that you have leaving a place where, if you're born and raised and immersed in Chicago and you're like, this is normal, and then you go to wherever you move to next, right? I mean, physically going and being immersed in a whole new country.
Right.
It's almost, I mean, California and Texas could not be more different. You know, just like Louisiana and New England could not be more different, or New York and New England,
right?
Or New York and Louisiana. So I'm like, there's a lot of things that are valued and gained there, but you kind of have to go. You have to have a really shitty job before you even know what a good one looks like. You need to have worked for some bad. You need to, as if you're a kid, you have to have some bad teachers before you know what a good one is, and a good coach versus a bad one. But the same for, you don't know what you don't know. So if you're like, this is normal, this is Chicago, and I can live with it, and then you go to another market and you're like, this is either way better, or I need to go back. You know, you're like, I need, and it sounds like you've been the Rolling Stone, gathering no moss throughout your career. But walk me through the mindset of what it was like to immerse yourself in another world, and then what that did from an impact and how it shaped you. Because you're a guy that your background was pretty interesting narrative and how you shared it with us. But why? What did you study in school, or why did you say, I want to be in business? Why didn't you want to be in healthcare or finance or legal, or, like, why did you know that you wanted to be in business?
So early on, actually, I didn't. My dad ran for committeeman. So as a police officer, he felt, hey, I'm going to run for committeeman. And so,
Is that below an alderman or something?
It's right below. It's like the vice president of that particular that alderman.
Mm-hmm.
And what's really interesting is, I remember walking around getting signatures, because you had to get a petition signed for your dad to be able to be on the ballot. And that was back in the day where you just open a phone book and you'd write people's names down and you would sign them. I mean, there was no cross-referencing, checking. I mean, I'm just, listen.
Back in the day, I'm pretty sure there's things like that.
We know that this happened, and people died, and you would have the people that they would still vote. So, but this will be a short story to tell you where my head was at. And I remember my dad, again, he taught me some interesting lessons, and he said, Joey, here, let me explain something to you. I'm making $35,000 a year. The job I'm about to get for this alderman makes about $40,000 a year. So I'm going to get a $5,000 raise. We're going to spend $150,000 of our nest egg. It's a 2-year job.
Oh,
He goes, I'll never get it back. He said, why do you think I'm doing this? Because it's not what I'm going to earn. When I have the power, the earning potential is unlimited. So I originally went to school for communications and public relations for campaign management because I wanted to get
involved in the
involved
power.
in politics
Yeah.
to get people in a position to lead and have power so that I could take advantage of that. Truly, that's what was instilled in me, kind of a Chicago process. And I did a couple volunteer work with campaigns, and I was like, this is like stuffing envelope. This is not what I'm about. I'm high level guy.
Yeah.
So I moved my direction into business. And then candidly, I was like, the best way to get into business right out of school is to work in a selling opportunity, right? It is probably the best opportunity for anyone, I would suggest, to get into the most difficult selling process, because it forces you to understand business, know your customer, train yourself, have the organization train you, understand pricing, proposals, and strategy at the very lowest level that all ramps up to. So I always thought that selling is the best opportunity for anyone in business to get into. I don't care what you're selling. It's just a great opportunity. You can move in any direction from that point. So, and to your point around the orbit of Chicago, people live and die. My wife is from a very small town in Texas. Those kids, when they're in high school, are saying, I can't wait to get out of here. When you're in Chicago, no one says, and you're a real Chicago person, you don't say, I want to get out of here. Where are you going? This is your life. There's no reason to go anywhere.
Yeah.
You've got everything you need. Your family's here, everything. And so when I left, it was to Houston, Texas, was my first job to run a selling group in Houston. So what's interesting in selling too is, which is not necessarily the best strategy, the guy who sells the most becomes the coach.
Mm.
And so they said, you're a great sales guy. Why don't you go down and run this Houston group to go start selling for us there? We're struggling. Sight unseen. Never been to Texas my entire life.
Sold. I'm in.
Got to Texas. Didn't know it was humid as hell. Didn't know it was hot as hell. Didn't even know there was a freaking ocean. I mean, this is how Chicago I was. I thought Lake Michigan was an ocean. I was like, there's an ocean in Houston. And I tried to sell myself on the fact that that's a cool ocean until you go to the beach.
Yeah, yeah.
And, there's a lot of Band-Aids in that water.
So your first job out of Chicago, I mean, same company you started with.
Same company.
So you were there for like 20 plus years or something.
25 years, yeah.
So they said, hey, we want you to go to Houston. And you chose to go to Houston just for the opportunity for work? Or
I
were
chose,
you like, I want out of Chicago,
I was like,
or?
listen, this will give me an opportunity to lead. This will give me an opportunity to increase my visibility within the company. I'll do it. And I remember my going away party. And this was before it probably was not acceptable then, but Chicago's a lot of jazz. We jazz with each other. So they all made shirts for my going away party that said there's two things in Texas, and that's steers and queers. And so everyone had this shirt on that this was my going away. They had everyone was so upset with me. They had no idea why I would leave, right? Fast forward, everyone now lives in Texas, candidly, for my family. But they had no idea why I would leave. That's crazy, unheard of. And so I get to Texas, and you start running this sales organization. And the first mistake you make is, hey, I'm Kelly from Bad News Bears. I'm going to catch every ball that gets hit in the air because I do not believe in any of these people on the field with me.
Nice.
And that's a difficult one. So that's when you have to start to step back and say, okay, what if I was to teach them what I know and then coach them through the process and hope that they do exactly what I say without me? And all you need is 4 or 5 of them to do that. And the rest of the 20 or 30 or 40 or 60 that you funnel in and out of the system, they're going to do their own thing. They don't want to work that hard. They don't want to put in the time, energy, and effort, and so forth. They'll front the system. All you need is 4 or 5 or 6 of them. Once you get 4 or 5 or 6 of them, that's it. Doing exactly that process, and they're refining it, and you're working together. So for me, it was an great opportunity to launch that career, and now in the selling leadership, and once you can get a group selling and rowing in the right direction and growing business ridiculously, then you get a region. So I think I was definitely the youngest director of sales for Konica Minolta in history. I was definitely the youngest vice president of sales ever to hit that. So by 32, I was a vice president of sales. I was responsible for 18 markets, which is kind of unheard of, and then just morphed into. And so for me, this is where this goes back to the resilience, and there's got to be something different when you're selling the same stuff, but you're multiplying the stuff you're selling because you're using different individuals, and the technology is evolving. And so there's two options. You become really good at understanding the technology, so you become a technology expert, which the company is like, whoa, let's give this guy more opportunity because he really knows the technology. Or you sit back and say, okay, let's start focusing on the art of the business transaction between the customer, maybe the customer's customer, and candidly, the organization that you're representing. And that's when I decided early on that I'm going to partner with a group in Chicago, which was Strategic Account Management Association, that really introduced me to principles of selling that were the highest level, that really created opportunities that were differentiation. And the word differentiation is what I was looking for. When I walk in the room, when I'm representing my organization, when I'm representing any product, any solution, when I'm designing a marketing strategy, what is my thought pattern is, how am I going to not smoke the cigarette that my mom smoked? Because everyone's smoking cigarettes. How am I going to be different than the message that my dad sent me in reference to don't be Gomer Pyle and write those ticket books? I want to create a differentiation that gets more yeses than nos, or enables more yeses or nos, or reduces or shrinks the selling process down by my conversation or talk track. Because at the end of the day, we're all selling the same stuff. It's just how are we positioning that particular product and solution. So that's when I partnered with them. That launched me into a whole new orbit within Konica Minolta, which was on their global strategic account side, which I was a charter member of, to take selling people from the organization, make them understand that there's a new way to represent our products and solutions globally to corporate customers worldwide, similar multinational organizations, and start that process. So I did that for 14 years, and that was the most satisfying opportunity. But again, you get to a certain point where what more can you do? There's so much to do, and there's so much to introduce. But what is the company willing to embrace and invest in growing that? And then that's where that becomes a challenge, and you have to make a decision, run the clock out, pull another 5 to 10 years at the same company, which would have been a great career. Look, I got a kid who got a master's degree from Pepperdine. I've got a kid in college today, and I've got a kid. If I would have stayed with them, Konica Minolta would have paid, bought me 7 houses, cars. I mean, they raised my family. I mean, they were my source of income. My wife, we were fortunate enough to be able to have her stay at home and work. She sacrificed, but she was able to stay home in today's day and raise our children. It was an unbelievable opportunity. So you're up against making the decision of staying with them and knowing that you can do exactly what you need to do. Your reputation's there. Everything exists. Your whole identity is wrapped up in this company for 25 years. Or leave and risk it all.
So how old were you when you left Chicago?
So I was, it was 1997. 1997 is when I left Chicago. So I'm 50 years old. So we can do some reverse math there.
But I went to public school. You went to private school, so you're going to have to do the math.
So I was 18 in 1990.
So between 20 and 25 years?
25 years, yeah.
So it's interesting. So you did about 24, 25 years in Chicago, and then you reinvented yourself. And then you did 24, 25 years with Konica Minolta, and it's time to reinvent yourself, which now you're on, Joey 3.0, right? Joey
3.0, yeah.
So Joey 3.0 is reinventing himself, and you went from a massive company that's global, billions of dollars at top line, I'm sure, right? To did you go to a startup? I mean, you went to a completely opposite.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's interesting how you go from Chicago to a massively opposite. I mean, can Houston be any different than Chicago? And then now you went from massive company to small company. And at the same time, the thing that transcended with you was that you, I mean, it's still a technology type based company, right?
Right. Fintech space. Yeah.
So explain that, walk people through that don't know what that is, because the genesis behind this podcast is I want people to understand that there is a glide path for people that can operate on the strategic side of our industry that could go into another industry because their skill set transcends, right? So, and then how that looks to others, because there's other people too that are going to be listening to this. They're like, okay, so there's a way. I don't have to. I think that we live in a world today where everybody's so specialized, even at their earliest of ages, right? And you have kids that are like, no, he's 7, but he plays baseball. That's all he's going to do. We don't have a lot of sport athletes. Everyone's specializing. So for you to, come back to this narrative of yourself, I think that the narrative is that you're breaking those concepts, those norms of where you have to stay in that market or you have to be in the family business of some kind. You're just snapping that over your knee and going, okay, well, look, I don't have to be, it's not like I can't play baseball now in my freshman year if I never played in 5th grade because all these other kids played nothing but that. It's not like that. You haven't missed the game. Like, the game is just beginning in our industry. We're in an industry that's in its infancy.
Right.
And, I mean, relative to all the other industries that exist, right? So we're an emerging industry that reinvents itself more aggressively than any other industry. So that part where you're breaking some concepts, but at the same time going you weren't intimidated when we talked about bringing you into an industry. You weren't like, well, look, I don't know those people and I don't know that stuff as much. You were more like the hairier we discussed it. Almost it seemed as though the more excited you were getting.
Right.
Does that make sense? Because
Right.
I wasn't trying to sell it. I was trying to I wanted you to back off the plate. I was like, if you're not going to believe in your ability to be successful in this industry, why the hell would I? So I almost wasn't like going reverse negative, but I was like, look, it's going to be challenging and understanding these things. But you were like, listen. So I guess it was because you were in that reinvention of your mindset where you were willing to make the risk to go into this industry. And that's the part where, I'm sorry, I'm just trying to dovetail it back around.
Right.
I think it's important for people to understand, like, you can start playing something as a sophomore in high school, having never done it again.
Absolutely.
And that's really where you're at, because now you have potentially 25 years in this industry now that you can roll with.
Right.
And half of our industry has been in this industry for more than 20 years.
Right.
Right. So there's a lot of run rate here.
Right. So what's interesting in reference to that is back to the Harrier. So you learn. So I learned, and everyone here, I'm encouraging to learn as much as they can with the organization they're working for, especially if you're with an IBM and HP, a large organization. They've got a lot of institutional knowledge to teach. And what's interesting is when we move to the global transaction piece, the global business, dealing with multinational organizations and transacting on a global scale is probably the most hairiest business transactions that you can ever imagine. You're dealing on both sides with different ERPs, different operating companies. Everyone's trying to transact. They're trying to honor national or global agreements. And it's virtually impossible to get everyone to march to the beat of both drums. So you have got stakeholders on the buy side, you've got stakeholders on the sell side, and you're trying to endorse this solution that's beneficial for both organizations. It's impossible to have a seamless transition.
Yeah.
Even today, with technology today, as we move to global ERPs, SAP, it doesn't make a difference. There's still going to be transactions. There's still going to be OEMs, distributors that are going to need to be participants that are their own independent companies. And so to be able to march or to be able to create a global strategy is very difficult. It creates a lot of creative thought. So when you have that experience or any experience that a company is affording you the opportunity to learn, Kirk, I didn't go to small first. I went and interviewed with Schneider Electric. So I went back to my boys at Strategic Account Management Association, which, we had 20 board members that were the strategic leaders of the largest organizations in the world. we're talking about IBM, Zurich. We're talking about all of these companies. Schneider Electric's on the board. And I started to interview. And the first thing I would say, they would say, well, you don't understand our industry. I said, oh, I understand the industry of strategic selling. I don't care what you do. Because what you do is I will learn, but you will allow me to afford you the opportunity is to think differently on how you position your solution globally. I didn't get hired. I probably interviewed for 10 gigs in multinational companies, didn't get hired. Who hired me was a fintech company that was a startup, a growth equity play, a 12 to 18 month, let's get this thing, let's get the EBITDA nice, let's get the top line moving. Let's correct our burn rate. Let's reinvent. Let's create some new policies and procedures so that someone acquires this company at a 10x multiple. Boom. And I said, well, this is interesting. And candidly, in the fintech space, the technology sells itself. I mean, my goodness gracious, it's machine learning. All the fintech stuff is remarkable. So it's the easiest sell on the planet. You say to yourself, well, why would they need me? Because they're stuck. They're in the fintech. They're in the financial sector. Spend a lot of money, don't know how to talk, don't know who to talk to, and don't know how to position these products and solutions properly. So once you're able to go back and compress the sales cycle, once you're able to go back and create personas, who should we be selling these solutions to, who has the real value, reinvent the fintech space, all of a sudden that organization starts to change. So they hired me as their chief revenue officer to be responsible for marketing and their entire revenue stream opportunity to get this organization over 12 to 18 months, knowing that I just went from 25 years of stability to that if we were to get this thing right, I could be gone in 12 months. And that's exactly what happened. So we were able to get this company exactly to where we needed it to be, get it to a position to get acquired, and then one of our board members. What's nice about this is when you're owned by a private equity company, they have other portfolio members that they either are adjacent to the industry or completely different. But the fact of the matter is they need a guy like us to rinse and repeat. Do exactly what you did there
So they just keep
to
the
this
bands.
company.
Yeah, go do it
and
again.
they just keep moving around, changing benefit companies and so forth. So there was a gentleman who was on the board of, or who was a previous CEO of MasterCard who said, hey, listen, I'd like to do this again. And in the fintech space. And that's when you and I had a conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And so to encourage this group, whoever listens to this podcast, is when you're dealing with a small company, it's like getting in the back of a motorboat. You can make sharp turns. You can go really fast. You're very nimble. You can agile. You can move. The right leadership, the CEO, can make great decisions, can make decisions that's best for their organization. Cannot be not short-sighted, not concerned with certain things that large enterprise leaders would be concerned with. And that's refreshing for guys like me who are looking to implement unbelievable strategies. And if those CEOs can trust guys like us to come into these organizations and implement these strategies, it will increase revenue. It will improve bottom line. It'll change the way we business develop. It'll change all aspects of the branding and marketing, the talk track within your customer base. It'll encourage the employees in the organization to see that the ship now is even moving that much faster. And you could still grow and not turn into this mammoth beast like IBM, which if you talk to someone which was a partner of mine, and you talk to someone at IBM, 90% of IBMers don't even know what 90% of IBMers do. It's a remarkable phenomenon over there. And so, you could still get big because you grew it right from the beginning and everyone's marching to the beat. Everyone understands the mission, the purpose. Now, there's one thing I do want to mention. Konica Minolta, no purpose, just mission. Multinational, Japanese-owned company, mission, sell. Innovate, sell. Fintech space, no purpose. Get a company profitable, everyone makes money, get out, greed. Overwatch, we have a mission, but we have a purpose. So this is, for me, the first time in my entire career that I'm taking the mission and I'm marrying it to a purpose without compromising either. and still able to achieve everything we want to do on the purpose side, but also ensuring the opportunity to produce and grow on the missional side. So it's really an interesting, to kind of come full circle. So I would encourage everyone to don't be discouraged to get out of industries. Because if you're smart, you're educated, that's translatable. Your ability to succeed. I don't care if it's the auto industry. I don't care if you're selling rubber gloves and you were in pharma. You have the ability to move around. Don't move just to farm, but because it's comfortable and you know that that's going to be a good hire. Because candidly, the company you just left for those reasons is going to be the exact company you go to. Just a different name on the door.
Yeah. I feel like we all go through stages in life, right? And there are some stages in our life where maybe when we're younger in our career, before we have a ton of maybe commitments or responsibilities, where you don't have kids or a mortgage or all these things. You kind of swing more. You swing more for the fences because you could strike out more. And then, when you do start establishing those responsibilities and duties and commitments, then you play a little bit more. You go from a offensive posture to more of a defensive posture of a mindset because you're now, speaking only for like maybe not even all men or just people that are raised from my generation. I guess you're like, I have to be a provider. I have to be a protector. And there's things that we just have, wired into the tenets of our biology maybe. But I think, you kind of aren't looking for you're mitigating risk in your growth of your career. And now you're trying to play it a little bit safer. And then you get to a point where maybe the kids get older or there's this and that. And you're like, okay, now, not that I have less of a, financial burden or risk of one aspect or the other, but I'm more willing to go out and take more risk again. And I've found that our careers, like life, are very cyclical. And I discovered that I'm never really in the business of hiring people that are happy, right? Everybody that works for her company, everybody has made a concession on how much money they make relative to what they were making or could make somewhere else. And the only thing I had to trade for that was a purpose. So like, hey, how would you like to come work over here where you're going to probably work more and you will work harder and you'll get paid less? How does that sound, right? And no one really buys in on that narrative. But I think my thing was just chipping away. Everybody that basically is on my management team at some point had said no to me, So I just had to keep chipping away at them. They just weren't ready. I had to wait for them to be unhappy.
Right.
And I think some people wait until they're unhappy before they make those changes. And I think that that's okay. Because they'll be a part of your life again where you'll shift from that defensive posture.
Right.
And you'll go more aggressively, more cavalier, more confidence from the scars you have through the middle 20 years of your career to where you're ready to be cavalier again and go take some risk, knowing that maybe you have a partner or someone else that back. You know that you can do it because you have other opportunities. You could always go backwards, right? So changing to get in this industry, I went out and I met with what I consider some of the stronger captains of industry, and I get the privilege of calling them my friends, and some of them are actually my mentors above board. I mean, listen, man, I was at home. Yeah, I mean, we were at the compound yesterday. We had guests in town, and we were all grilling and doing our thing, and I look down and I see a text from a CEO in this industry that I haven't spoken with for a while, who out of nowhere said, you need to stop saying these things and start using these terms more for what you do. And the only thing is, I'm like, thank God people give a shit about me enough to give me unsolicited coaching and advice. I will be loyal to forever for those people because it takes a lot of effort to take 5 minutes and go give someone advice, knowing that some people aren't built really well to take criticism or advice. They see it as an attack. And I was like, man, how lucky am I to have amazing people in my life that, they're going to give me that advice, even if I didn't ask for it, knowing that it would make me a better person. This space in general, I would sit down with all of you about 2 weeks after I sat down with this ring of people that have got scars and a lot of experience, high, wide and deep within this space. They work for big companies, small companies. I do think there's a lot of value in going to the Schneiders and Eatons and the institutional groups because there's a lot of things that you just learn from a professional acumen basis that you can take away and go to a smaller company and be like, hey, this company's great because it's it's slingshot and Wild Wild West, but what would benefit that company more is some of that structure, some of
Right.
that discipline. Where in the early stages, you want it to be kinetic and ballistic. You
Yeah.
want it to be who knows as you reinvent yourself on a daily, and then you start reinventing yourself on a weekly, and then you get to the monthly, and then you're quarterly, and then you're arriving at it. We only have to really pivot hard once a year. We're light years away from that still, obviously, but we are going out and throwing a lot of crazy shit out there. And I think that when I was having conversations with you guys, it was really on the back end of me getting some really good advice from people that I did solicit from. I would reach out to these people and be like, can I take you to lunch? I just need to bounce. I need someone to bounce some ideas off of for an hour that are going to objectively measure and weigh something. And more importantly, they're people that have experience, that their input matters. It's very high value to me because I think that they've been there. So I sat down and I said, hey, I'm thinking I need a new this, I need a new that, and I need, probably a couple of these. And I thought I would, this is the stagger or the rate in which I'm going to grow. So I'm going to incrementally hire one per quarter. And that means I'll take down 4 guys before the end of the year. And then I think I want to focus on these things too, and this and that. And I think that we could really thrive here. And, I went in there with all these really great ideas and painting with a very broad stroke here. The collection of input I got was, I agree you need those people. I don't agree they should come from the industry. Stop harvesting and recirculating people within this industry. It's not solving any of the problems. Right. You need to find people that are like-minded, but you need them to be more focused. So instead of finding someone that could be my XO or my 2 or 3, we had a tendency as all startups do of giving everybody 5 hats to wear. Mm-hmm. So here's your primary duty. These are your 4 collateral duties. Don't mess this up. And when you're going 5 different directions, right, sometimes you're kind of really going nowhere. So I had to thin that. And to do that, I had to bring people in because I needed more cycles and bandwidth, but I also needed people that could pick up where I left off in certain things. If you look at our management team, everybody represents a blind spot that I have. So I took the advice of hire senior leaders that come from outside the industry and let them introduce a new dynamic, because that really stirs the pot more. And then they're like, don't hire them 1 a quarter. Rip the Band-Aid off, get them all on now. Take the risk. Do you believe in yourself or not? Then sack up and just bring them on. Like, don't do the death by 1,000 cuts. Be bolder than that. And then, the other advice was, look, I had about 5 serious data points that I had to do. And they're like, with your leaders, stop having so many collateral duties. You start assigning stronger swim lanes and then letting them, I can't. We as leaders sometimes fail in 2 aspects. Or when I say we, I mean me and those that I've seen. One is I have failed to explain my intent of what I need to get accomplished clear enough. And I'm learning that I need to be able to explain it so well that even the lowest person on our team, not lowest, but the FNG, they understand it crystal clear as well. Because if I can't explain it well enough, then how would they understand it? I think that is the biggest mistake that we tend to make is operating without clearly communicating we'll maybe explain our expectations or goals, but not the intent well enough to where we allow people to autonomously operate within their own strengths to where they could achieve the results we want or be more productive in the way that we need them, or their output in general is just massively improved by allowing them to get there on their own, just like what we would want, mm-hmm, right? And then I think that I also needed people that were more expert or could go deeper. I don't need to go wider on the leadership team. Right. I didn't need everybody having so many overlapping offsets. I needed someone that could be very surgical and go as deep as we needed to on one aspect of business, right? So I was like, okay, instead of having Swiss Army knives, I need one blade that cuts sharper than everything else, right? So I started, I went on a full court press. So I was like, hey man, and you were telling me about some things. And I was like, how would you like to make less money than you make right now and come work twice as much to help me reinvent something? And I'd be like, I know I'm sitting in the right church. I'm not in the right pew. And I think, sadly, I also discovered that I'm not the guy that could turn that corner. I wish I could, but I have to be a little bit of the all things to all people. So I had to relief. Like, I'm comfortable with certain things and I'll stay with those things because I feel like I'm productive and good at it. So I'm going to do that more. And I'm like, I have to turn over everything and not be an individual contributor to anything. And now I need to trust you on that strategy, or Rob on leadership, or Jesse on X, or Anthony on Y.
Right.
You know, I had to kind of go around the horn and reinvent myself entirely. And I had to do it quickly because this industry operates pretty high speed, low drag. And if you don't pivot quickly, then you're outflanked, you know, before you know it. So I was like, I think I'm going to go do all these things. And I came off a leadership summit where we, you know, every quarter we do these massive leadership summits, and then we come off and we execute. And coming off that summit, I was like, even if they executed everything I asked them to, it's still not enough. And then I had to go pivot. So then I went and I met with all these CEOs and got all the input and advice I could. And then I went back and I barely explained it to everybody else in the leadership team. And I said, we're going to be making some changes. And I started pulling guys out one at a time. I'm like, I'm going to hire 4 of these guys, and this is why. And it's going to cost us $1 million in SG&A. So at a minimum, you know, I'm only rough order. You know, I'm like, first of all, I'm selling both ends against the middle. I got to get you to buy in on coming into the program, and I need them to buy in on allowing me to bring you into the program, because every time I absorb more in my on that side is less opportunity for compensation or growth or something else on the other side. So I basically had to get to the point where we were moving fast enough that I said to you guys, at some point I had to be like, do you guys trust me? Because I don't think I'm going to be able to explain it in a dissertation well enough for you guys to be able to rationalize it or justify it to your own emotions. It's going to be an emotional decision, so let's do this. Did you feel like it was an emotional decision you made? Because you certainly didn't do it based on economics alone, because you would have probably taken a different job where you were making more money, right?
Right.
And I remember, what was it that convinced you to feel safe going into a brand new industry? I mean, it sounds like you had a lot of confidence, but knowing that this is a very small niche industry where we're all 1 degree or 2 degrees of separation from each other. Everybody's massively approachable. We have celebrities in this industry, and they'll talk to you. If you even reach out to them on LinkedIn, even the top guys in this space will respond, right? And that's the beauty about this industry. I think the higher they get, the less of an ego they have sometimes. But like, what made you feel comfortable? Was it an emotional thing? Like, was it the mission? Was it more about the purpose and the people that were assigned to serve? I mean, what was it that I explained to you to where you understood it well enough to where you were ready to take the risk of putting your career on it, knowing that we all are in the same boat? You know, we got kids' college to pay for and things. So, like, what was it?
So candidly, it's quite a few variables to that equation. So the total result was, a sum of. You did do a really good job in recognizing and being vulnerable up front, which is very which is rare. To see someone at their leadership level say, I'm going to hire someone who's better than me. We all say this. We all say it's the best thing to do. But when you say that, you're basically putting yourself in a position to possibly be replaced.
100%.
Okay. And so I've grown up in a situation where I've seen a lot of good leaders hire a lot of not so good people, so they maintain their level of
they
efficiencies.
protect, build enterprise around
exactly.
a little bit. Yeah.
So really, that, to be honest, that was the first time I've ever been in a process of an interview or at all at the highest level where the leader is expressing their vulnerabilities and the need for certain positions to be filled within that organization. Again, not that you weren't good at those positions, that you would be willing to relinquish the control of those particular functions for the best of the organization to grow. Very unique. That was the first thing. Second thing was, of course, like anything else, you've got to do a significant amount of research before you endeavor into any industry. This is such a growth potential industry that it's unheard of. It is the last frontier. We're all traveling out to California to go look for gold. This is an unbelievable opportunity. It's the edge of everything that happens on the front end. So all of the emerging trends and technologies will all be harnessed within the data center space. At the end of the day, it's where we park our cars. it is
This tail
it's
wags the
remarkable.
dog.
It's remarkable. So you've got a potential. From selfish side, I'm saying, wow, I could do this I could reinvent myself and do this for 20 years in this space and not ever leave this space. And it's an exciting space. Third, the fact that why I chose Overwatch over even talking to NTT, which is one of my customers, to go look for a larger company, is the fact that we're tying a media component, the fact that we have some IP, we've got a conference, we're able to, which are candidly for me, strategic Trojan horses for the space. It's outreach, it's additional conversational talk tracks. It's hard to quantify, but we will, to be able to tie revenue back to the media opportunities that we're creating. It's above and beyond normal forms of marketing. So that I immediately looked at a catalyst and say, okay, they're already in place. I don't have to reinvent the wheel. I don't have to do anything. All we have to do is put some more practice and process around that particular area. That was incredible. But really the kind of the last piece was the purpose. So, I've always been I'm a Christian. I've always been a call to action guy. I've been on nonprofits. I've been on boards. We created Young Life in Bay City. We moved there. So I was always let's create opportunity. And the more and more I started to look at this thing and said, wow, from someone looking outside, who was a veteran but not a combat veteran, who took advantage of what the government had to offer and took what the military had to offer me. I looked at this thing to say, wow, the veteran community is really treated as a charity. It's not treated as a strike force. It's not treated as the most unbelievable mobile workforce on the planet today. It's hey, it's the right thing to do, hire a vet. And that didn't enrage me, but that encouraged me to say, no, I want to flip the script on that. We should be thanking Overwatch for finding these folks to put them in a position to lead and succeed, because they're the most talented human assets on the planet today at their age. And they will continue to grow with proper training. And so the purpose component of the fact that I want to flip the script on the conversation of a veteran is not a charitable action. Even though the government throws so many different programs at it to make it look like it's a charitable action. Tax deduction, rebates, the whole 9 yards. Government contracts that could be awarded because you hire veterans. Yeah. All these set-asides. It's unbelievable. But then tie it to the fact that if we all have purpose, I don't care what it is, if we all have purpose, we now can raise a family. We can be better parents. We can be better community folks. And we won't think about taking our life. So the reality is the purpose of what Overwatch drives it to, which is scary to hear, to say, hey, we create a purpose to mitigate suicide in veteran community. That's a heavy blow. Some people don't even want to hear that because it's so heavy. They want to just say, does that really exist?
Negative. Yeah,
does that really exist? Suicide's scary. It can happen to anybody. When you see a car accident, someone dies, the first thing you say, was your seatbelt on? And so you immediately go right to the car crash with the suicide, and which should happen. But this function of tying in all of the resources available to the veteran community, either through funding or some vocational opportunity, will mitigate and it be quantified. So the purpose was last, but now what's crazy, it's become the first. So now it's reverse engineered to say, okay, as I develop the message and the strategy moving forward, the purpose now comes to the forefront, and then everything else is reverse engineered back into telling that story. So long answer to this is there's quite a few variables. I was never worried about the risk, because after I took that first risk, I needed to take that first opportunity to believe in myself, to say, okay, listen, I've listened to my wife this entire time. You know, you get to a certain age where your wife's saying, you're so handsome. I'm like, I'm bald. Are you lying or is this real? And, your wife will encourage you and say, you're great. You're the best. And, you just think that it's just words, but because you don't believe it in yourself. And the fact is, if you really are good at what you do, you can apply that anywhere. And so the risk then got removed from that standpoint. So it was less about risk. I mean, the potential, for us, the potential is, yes, are we making less? Probably, but the potential will outweigh. There'll be a point where there's an ROI on this thing that's going to be ridiculous, candidly, just because of how well this organization is growing and pushing in the right direction and driving towards that purpose. So there's quite a few, but the first one was, and this is not me telling you because you're my boss. The reality is your vulnerability to be able to mention that and accept that, and that not to be it's not a story you tell. It's something that you really believe in, and that doesn't say that you're not great at everything that you do. The fact of the matter is, yes,
I have limits.
Everyone has limits.
Yeah, and I had to be honest with myself and realize, like, I even had to realize that at some point, I may not be the CEO that this business needs. And our mission and our purpose to serve we love building data centers, and I love this industry. It's the wild, wild west. My best friends are in this space. Our purpose is the thing that wakes me up at, dark 30 every morning, and it gets me running. And I really find a lot of value in those things. And when we start impacting people's, like, it's not every day you get to wake up in the morning and change another person's soul while doing it for work, not as a volunteer, not as a nonprofit. We are a for-profit business that's providing purpose to human beings that they find significance in themselves again, and they're less likely to hurt themselves because of it. And it turns out they've probably been trained on advanced weapons, machinery, and tech. They understand a hierarchy of a chain of command, and they typically put the mission and the command first. So I could marry that person I can marry the company that needs that talent to the person that needs that purpose. And it became so infectious or addictive that became the primary part of joy, not the economics of top line or bottom line revenue or what our EBITDA growth was. Like, I was more like, let's measure this dashboard based on how many souls we impact. And then I realized, shit, I have my limits. If we hit a plateau and I'm unable to move the needle any further to get us to have a greater impact on the veteran community, then I have to be humble enough as I hire straight, I have some OGs on my team from a leadership perspective, but I have to be able to go just be a chairman or something one day and allow someone that could pick up where I left off, or someone in general that could be better than me. So what I guess I'm trying to say is it transcends beyond my management team. If I cannot make the greatest impact on the veteran community than someone else, then I have to, for the sake of them, because it is our purpose, then I have to assume a different role. And you're already seeing that with what I'm doing now, where I'm like, okay, I have to trust, Rob, my new COO, or my chief of staff. I need those guys. From the strategy perspective, I have amazing talent on that management team. All they need is sometimes a little bit of a tweak here or there, someone to pressure test something here and there, and let them know they're on the right track and to stay, within the over the plate. And that's an omnipresence that's required now because we have so many talented people on the management team that contribute to revenue that they needed to have a quarterback.
Right.
And someone that could thread the needle between all of our businesses to make sure we weren't compromising one thing for the other.
Right.
I think the hardest thing that we would have as a business is to get to the point where our growth hits a plateau and we feel like the only way we can continue to put more points on the board is to shift away from our purpose to try to make up for something on the finance side. I'm like, no. We're going to bring on a team that won't compromise one thing for the other. Like, there is a way to make sure that the rising tide will lift all boats at the same time. You just have to make sure it's a decision. It's a decision you have to make that you're going to maintain your commitment to that without compromising your focus. Or you could make about 1 million reasons to justify why it's acceptable from a business perspective to make those compromises, right?
Right.
I think I hired people that are like, no, we can be successful at both. We should be able to do an amazing thing for our employees to where they're, they feel safe to come to work. They are inspired by who they work with or what we're doing. And because of those things, are fulfilled when they leave every day. And we should be able to make sure that we're doing that for them. Our customers and our partners should benefit greatly from having a workforce whose only threat falls from outside the business, right? So their productivity is at a higher level because they're not worried about the politics from within the business. Now, if you take that and you have healthy employees, and if you take care of them, it turns out that they take care of your customers. And then if you take care of those customers, a lot of the things that we need in business to grow and scale kind of takes care of itself, because then they allow us to maintain those relationships, which converts, yes, on paper, a 6-month contract into a 3-year, 4-year annuity. I have clients that we had day one that we've only grown with. We've never lost, right? And I think that if it's from building and growing that stuff from the inside out, then it'll self-radiate. And it'll also attract, I hope, those that see us for what we are, and they'll want to do more business with us, or they'll want to partner with us and give us capital to be able to grow, because they know that we're going to tie that back into an impact to the veteran community.
Right.
So we're solving the problem for labor, but we're really, and I do think that that's, a problem isn't really the right word in my opinion. I believe the word is we're on the cusp of a crisis, a labor crisis. I think a lot of people know that we're, short, 80, 90,000 people by an X amount of time. But what they're not accounting for is the silver tsunami of the 45% of our industry that's been here for more than 20 years that, they probably came from another industry that they're in for 10 to 20 years before they started this. So they're not just looking, like there's a lot of people that are going to be looking to retire, right? And we're getting ready to see the recession and what that means. Well, our industry is growing and thriving through this dichotomy of where the economy is going to kind of trend in the opposite direction of the growth of our industry. So there's a lot of moving parts, and I just said, hey, look, I'm going to have to hire people that will buy in on the purpose and put that first, and then they'll hold the line, when it comes to making sure we don't compromise what we're doing. Like, I'm not going to be like, oh, I got to go get a better number financially, so go get me 50% of those candidates that don't have we're not going to do that. We're going to continue to stay the course until the impact is made, right? But tying you guys into that is risky, knowing that there's probably half my management team right now could be a president of any other company, and there's a couple of guys on my team that could be CEOs of another business. So I have to be on my game to show up and be worthy to lead that type of team of talent. And it's almost underwhelming. I mean, it's overwhelming some days, because I'm like, think about the people that we have. I mean, I got, on my management team combined, I probably have 150 years of experience of with them. That's a lot.
It is, yeah.
We have a 12-man management team, right? So, yeah, that's a strong team, but we all know each other well enough, I think, to where we could short talk, where we can almost talk in code, like when you're in the military, where there's people that are just speaking abbreviated and you understand what they're saying because you all understand each other's intent. That allows us to be as productive as we can be. Yeah.
Yeah.
You agree?
I agree 100%. Yep. And we see it every day. Yep.
I think watching when you hire people that are, they have the same personal constitution in life, when you bring them together, then there's really like, have you felt, what was your biggest concern coming into a group like that? Like I have as a management team where, I hired a couple of you guys that have no data center experience, and you're both you're on the executive leadership team, not just the senior leadership team. So were you worried about the acceptance of your peers, or like the way you'd be measured and weighed? Because we have a lot of alphas. Right?
Yeah. If this was 15 years ago, I would, it's one of those, I hate those cliches to say, you get to a certain point in your age where you start to have so much confidence in who you are that you can go into a room, you can either lead the room or you can be part of the room, and you can get acceptance and likability. And what I was surprised, though, because I have been in you get to a certain point where you're in now leadership roles, so you're with leadership folks. Ego is, no one's amigo, but there's a lot of ego. You've got military ego. My goodness gracious, if you were to explain the background of some of these people, like Rob, for example, and say, okay, he's going to be on the staff, and that would be scary to 90% of the people. But when you put them in a room, not only were they accepting, they were interested in how you can help them improve the overall condition of the organization and their own business with your existing leadership team. And so that doesn't just happen. Obviously, there was a lot of prep work that that there was a lot of evangelizing that you probably needed to have happen over a course of a period of time to marinate your leadership team, to have them embrace the fact of that this is nothing but good. It's not jeopardizing. It's not taking away. It's going to be nothing but great for the organization, and then accept that. And, so I've been off and on. So started only 2 weeks ago, but hanging out with the crew for 3 weeks prior to that, it's been overwhelming. And no one's taken their foot off the gas in reference to needing, receiving, or wanting knowledge to increase their ability to grow. So to answer your question is, no, I wasn't worried. I was concerned that there would be a couple of guys that would be felt alienated by someone coming from the outside in. It's no different than consultants that grab your watch. They tell you exactly what time it is on your own damn watch. And you said, hey, listen, I could have done that for myself. And so that's what I was concerned with. It, but we didn't. It wasn't realized.
It's a fair concern, and you should be concerned. I think that we all come to work to lead or be led, and we should have a high expectation or standard. Like, I'll tell you this. I have no problem being a good Indian, but you best bring it if you're going to be the guy that I work for. And I've got to work for some savages. And I mean, I learned just as much of good things from them as bad things. So, I mean, like, as parents and kids, like, you love your parents, but you're like, I'm not going to do what they did. Doesn't mean they're doing it wrong. That's what their generation was doing. It's just that we look to pick up where they left off. It's not because of a good or a bad. It's just a different, and that's called evolution. And we have to evolve in the way that we approach these things. And that's the transparency that we needed on our leadership team. So I look at these studs and I'm like, any one of these people could go do whatever. I needed them to buy in on one thing, which is, are you able to lead those that you also are going to be led by? Like, it's a very selfless leadership mentality to where, like, you don't ever have to be right. We just have to be better. So the best idea wins. And I learned something early. You get pockets of things from people that you talk to, and it can be very tangent. Like, they didn't intend to have a narrative around that, but they just happened to suddenly mention something off the cuff, and that had the more profound impact on me. And one was this guy. He's the CEO of Compass, and he's been around for a long time. He's seen a lot of things and has had some major impacts on this industry. And he said something. He goes, "Yeah, we shoot heroes. We don't need those here, right?" And one of his colleagues, where he used to work with, a guy named Jim Smith, who they both came from digital together. And I was like, maybe there's a mindset that existed there that they were creating on their leadership team. But Jim called it the zero brilliant asshole policy, which is like, I don't care how smart you are, but if you treat people horribly, you got to be removed.
Mm-hmm.
So between those two people that came from a very similar thing, there was a lot of things I was pulling out of them that came from the origination of the market, it seemed like. And those things I try to permeate back into our leadership team, to where I'm like, listen, man, zero brilliant assholes, and we don't need any heroes here, guys. So no one has to posture. Like, the language we try to use is like, you guys are here already, so you don't have anything else to hide, and you got nothing to prove. So just start coming to work ready to be led. Like, you have to come here and teach as well as learn from each other. And I think that the way I positioned the new guys coming in without industry experience from a leadership perspective is that you had the experience from the leadership side that what we needed. The optics in which you view things holistically from a global perspective was what we needed strategically. And I had to say, hey, listen, I'm going to go find someone, because I'm not enough anymore. I need someone that who has more horsepower. So that was something that they're like, are you sure? Because that could also be someone that could one day go like this and be the CEO. And I'm like, even better.
Right.
If they're better at that, then I 2 for 1. Now the veteran community gets more of what they deserve, and our industry gets more of what they need.
Right.
It doesn't have to be me, is what I'm saying.
Right.
Like, as a shareholder, or like, it's not going to change certain things. I'll still be in orbit, able to contribute at the best way that I can.
Right.
But we all know that the game's over. The party will end for all of us, whichever role we have. And the healthiest thing we could do is evolve them up. I already have a plan for what my succession is. I mean, it'll still be with us, but it'll be building not microgrids, but micro businesses that still feed the ecosystem. And there's some things there that I think that only we can do with our platforms. But for you, taking it back, like it's got to be knowing that these people are open-minded for you to teach them. It's got to be something that allows you to be more productive, but you have to be willing. Like I went to every one of them too. Just like I sat down with you and said, this is my intent and these are my expectations. Was it clear?
Yeah.
I went to every one of them one-on-one and said, this is my intent and this is my expectations. And they're committed to learning as much from you as they humanly possibly can, but they're also committed to teaching you because every one of them has a skill set that is better. Every one of them would go deeper than any one of us on the business on one thing that's relative to the business, which is why we have a 12-dimensional leadership team that are almost all completely opposite of the other, but they offset each other's blind spots. Do you agree?
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
And we'll continue to grow that management team as we discover
Right.
that we have more areas of focus we need to improve upon. Organically, we're not going to get there on our own. In fact, I don't even want people working on the things that they do really, really poorly. I mean, I do want them to be aware of it and try to improve on those things, but I'd rather they just take all their horsepower and put it more behind the things they do great, because that's what makes the business move forward, and that's what has the greatest impact on the veteran community by, essentially helping raise awareness and money to support fighting suicide. And then we get to do the same thing on the mission critical side, where we get to be a part of some amazing projects. We're on some of the coolest projects in the industry right now. And we get to work with some of not just the greatest leaders in this space, but some of the emerging ones too, that are going to they're going to make a big impact in, 3, 4, 5 years from now.
Yep. Absolutely. Yep.
When you got into our industry, I mean, you had like a 1 month long interview process with us. And I think I brought in the entire management team one time. And I was like, I think everyone at that level that you were going to be operating at, it was important that the social dynamic and chemistry was right. Knowing that we do have, we have some really bold personalities, right? And, that's a strength and a weakness. All of our best things, the knife cuts both ways, they say. So I just felt like I think Pat Lencioni wrote the book, you got to be humble, hungry, and smart. That's the ideal characteristics of the ideal player or team player. I think that those are the things I just needed them to feel. And that's an energetic type of thing. Don't you agree? Because you were actually probably interviewing us as much as we were interviewing you.
Right.
And I had to let you kind of sell yourself, since that's one of the things that you'd be tasked with influencing others in terms of the decisions they make. So let's see how well you do. Right. And I think that it was well received, but when you got in, like, what was the first, week or two, because you've been around for, you've been helping us a little bit before you were on the clock, but let's just say you're here for a month. At what point did you feel like you made the right decision?
Literally our first meeting, because, it's difficult. So, new guys come in as the strategist to really look at what are we doing, how do we do, and how do we go to market.
Hey guys, we're in the data center industry, and this is our new chief strategy officer. He has 0 data center experience, but he's in charge of our strategy now. Have at it. I mean, it wasn't quite that way, but they knew. They're like, no, you're at a point where you could see that it's all a widget and you're just playing chess.
Absolutely. And, these guys are well-known practitioners in their space, and here comes this guy who is going to ask them a bunch of questions on how they do it. And, like anything else, before you can come up with a diagnosis to improve or take your vision of what you think the organization should be and tie that into the brand and the messaging, is very important to do a full assessment and get a complete understanding of philosophy, go-to-market, mission, the stuff that's on someone's website. That's easy to read, but really, what does it look like? How is the sausage being made on a daily basis? And that was candidly our first meeting, and they opened up, and they weren't defensive. They weren't, they weren't, hey, we do it this way because there's no other way to do it. There wasn't, this is the way we're going to do it. Everyone was open to providing as much information as I needed to really start to draw down a process for me to start to say, okay, these are some recommendations. We can, move the needle in 1 degree in this direction under this particular strategy, can pay off, significant dividends, right? It's little things like that. So that's the first thing I looked at to say, okay, how can we, without being as intrusive as possible, of these folks that are continuing to operate, because the last thing we need is them to second guess what's happening, or them feeling like someone's looking over their shoulder, because we need them to continue to succeed, not only on their existing, but now give them additional responsibilities to continue to succeed as we start to draw this thing out. So the first day was refreshing because everyone was open to that. I'm used to coming in and taking over salespeople that their first concern is, am I going to take their cheese from them?
Yeah.
Am I going to tell them that we're going to sell differently? Am I going
Comp
to take their
plan change,
customers
yeah.
away? How are we going to be represented? And and teaching a salesperson a new technique within a selling strategy or selling is the most difficult thing on the planet. We're talking about someone who's 40, 50 years old, who has a lot of crystal things on their desk saying they were the best. And you're telling them, hey, you can be better, right?
Yeah.
That's a difficult challenge. And so that didn't happen at your organization. I was like, whoa. These are guys that could have said, hey, do you know what I've done?
Oh,
Do you know the
sure.
plaques that I have? Who is this guy? And he's never been in the data center space? Are you kidding me? So that was really refreshing for me to be able to look at that. And now it's, in a very short period of time, it's allowed our group to be able to create strategies that, once we have that defined mission or that defined purpose and brand against our 4 operating companies, to really draw the business moving forward. And these guys get it. And it's really interesting. So there was never a concern at all.
What do you, when you were doing all that research in the industry, what did you see? I mean, I have books. I have 3 books actually of reports printed out that I've highlighted multiple pages and tabbed and stuff like that. But like, I'm feeding you lots of information right now, or Interglobix magazines, or, I'm giving you anything that I can to help you get rolling into it. From someone that has been in this industry for a long time, we feel it. We already know what the CAGR growth is. We know what's coming. We know that we're on the back end of the 4th industrial revolution. We feel like we're soon going to be entering into that 5th industrial revolution, which is going to be really the symbiotic relationship that we have with all the technologies that we've really been originating in the 4th, and how that'll improve us as humans versus us, just because I think that there's a lot of misuse of tech.
Right.
So what was some of the stuff that you saw in the industry? Because there's, like I said, going to be people that are looking to be reinventing themselves too. And they're like, if this guy could do it, I could do it. But he was reading information, plus he knew some folks. So like, what was the data that you saw that, helped validate that you were on the right path and going into an emerging industry versus one that was, like, I would not want. There are some industries right now that are the dodo bird. They just don't know it yet.
Right. So coming from the fintech space, first of all, highly competitive was the electronic manufacturer. On the Japanese side, Xerox got a lot of competitors there. At any given time, if you were responding to our global RFP, there would be 6 or 7 suppliers at any given time. It was magic how everyone knew about it. Fintech space, everyone did the same thing, but maybe a little bit different. They had a little bit of a different IP. You had to create differentiation. Difficult, but still something that you can really succeed in if you change the direction and the messaging. The mission critical space, the trend that I looked at specifically, because part of my previous life at Konica Minolta was we had a very large MSP, large IT staff, which we sold into cybersecurity. So we utilized our own. Cyrus was our customer, or we were their customer. We used space in the data center, so there's some familiarity. So I looked at, okay, what are the translating or the complementary technologies that I quickly was like, I'm looking at this thing the wrong way. When you said there's a crisis in labor, I go back to supply chain, and supply chain is, that's the great equalizer. The fact that we have not had wars in countries is because of supply chain, meaning Dell. We've heard of the theory of the conflict mitigation of the Dell theory, the fact that Dell partnered with China and Singapore. I think it was Singapore, that the fact that these are countries that have been at odds with each other, but now you put an influx of billions of dollars for them to provide the manufacturing, the assembly of Dell computers, and them having to work together through the supply chain. Then look at this and say, the economy is more important than our conflicts. So supply chain mitigates conflict. And then you look at the reverse side. What if there's a breakdown? What if supply chain is no longer important, or there's a breakdown in supply chain? Labor is a huge function of supply chain. If we cannot produce the labor for an industry, long-haul driving, there's a solution. Self-driving trucks. We don't have self-driving human assets that are going to go work in the data center space and fix something. We actually need human beings, skilled, trained human beings. If there's a breakdown, it's not only a crisis for the labor component, it's a crisis for the entire industry. So there is a significant, so I looked at that's the fix. That's the potential. How can we get as many human assets trained as quickly as we possibly can to be placed with either ourselves or our customers to support this space? And then it's a natural progression because you're getting the best talent, 200,000 transitioning veterans each year that are ready and willing to apply themselves and make a significant amount of money in a space that they are right now, as they are working on whatever they're working on, they have no idea that they're going to be in the data center space, period. So we get them to fill the void for the opportunity in labor. So we have plenty of labor. We just have to identify, train, certify, and then implement.
I think that what you and your team are going to be putting together is just going to have a really, I think it's going to solve the existential threat of our industry. I think that what you guys are doing, and I'm watching you guys come together with these amazing ideas, and you're really, it's amazing to watch how you collaborate with the rest of the guys in the team, because they just left the rev. They just love to, brainstorm really cool ideas and then figure out which one seems the boldest, and that's the one they want to go tackle the hardest, I feel. And I mean, I'm lucky to have people that are still swinging for the fences, but let's do this, because I mean, I feel like we got around the horn, and there's a lot of this, and there's going to be a podcast that we're going to do with a couple of you guys all at the same time. And some of that stuff I could draw out from that, but I want to shift gears back and start kind of bringing this one home, because my objective is I wanted people to understand not who you were from the perspective of what you do for Overwatch as the chief strategy officer, but a lot of the things that we do are focused on helping understand the psychology of veterans as they transition from one industry to the next. And the same is for those that we are finding that are coming from, that are non-veterans, civilian counterparts that are leaving one industry for the next, right? And I wanted those to understand, like, you could still come into this industry. You're not, because you didn't play baseball since you were 5, you could still play baseball when you're 15, and you're not going to be out of the game.
Right.
And so being new to this space is not always a negative thing. In fact, in many cases, you were hired intentionally because you're from outside the industry, and I didn't need groupthink. I need someone that's going to introduce and pollinate our industry with ideas that came from another aspect of technology, but could be applied in principle in our industry as well, especially within our own business. So I think the other leaders that I spoke with, they were like really encouraging me to go from outside the industry to find that leadership. The other part is, I think that, what you, I think that where you came from really defines where you're going, right? And I have found those that have the most colorful and creative, sadly, in some cases, really negative experiences, right? Sounds like you could make the most out of some of those things, and it's the optics in which you view any problem. Like, I could choose to see it in which it was the worst thing that ever happened to you, or I can see it as the thing that was the greatest thing that ever happened to you. We live in a tragic world. There's tragic things that happen every day, and it's what we do with those things that allow us to determine our own future. and it was sadly a shitty story, but it was the best thing that happened to you, it sounds like, because it helped you get a really laser focus. As an example,
Right.
not sure how much you know about that, but when I had cancer once, and it's like you have all these things in life that everyone else gets all caught up in. On there's all this static and noise of bullshit and small little dramas, and then one day everything's just whoosh, and you're like, oh, okay, so everything that's important goes back to top dead center, and all that other shit that isn't just kind of magically goes away, and that gives you laser like focus. I feel like it was an advantage getting cancer. I don't wish anybody had it, but it certainly
Right.
woke me up and made me start thinking about how to live my life in a more meaningful or urgent way.
Right.
And you know, for those that are going to be listening, this is why we wanted to have that sit down. I was like, hey, Joe, sit down and tell your story, because people that aren't, we want more people like you to come into this industry and feel like they're not behind the game because they didn't specialize in this industry for the last 20 years. You could come in brand new and make a big impact.
Right.
So let's go back. There's a few things I like to ask people in these podcasts, but for yours, it's unique. And this is kind of like religion and politics all at the same time with one question. What's the best pizza in Chicago?
So thin, I would say
Oh, no. One pizza.
one pizza.
We're not like
Deep
6A
dish.
and 5A and pizza.
You
There's
know,
one
I
champion.
would say Lou Malnati's or Gino's. You gotta
I feel
go
like
with-
I just lost half
Yeah.
your credibility with the audience, right? Gino's is better.
Yeah, Uno's is okay, but you can only get one location to get that pizza. So
I don't like that cornmeal crust.
Lou
Illuminati.
Malnati's, you can get it pretty much anywhere in the city you want.
All right. So, what now? Because you have a big audience. You've got a lot of connections, and people know what you do. I'm sure when you post, there's people that track. When you're talking to people about you're in the data center, like, hey, I'm in the data center industry. What do you tell them? Like, hey, I shifted. I'm working in the data center industry now. And they go, well, what's that? What do you say?
So for I don't say data center, I say mission critical space.
Okay.
So which is not making me sound like I'm more important than saying that data center is not important, but
I think the most prevalent term now that we're probably all evolving towards is digital infrastructure.
yeah, digital infrastructure,
Yeah.
mission critical space, evolving technologies, and that's what I'm explaining. I mean, the fact of the matter is, everyone. It's difficult. When I say I work for Konica Minolta, they thought I worked for an oil and gas industry. Because of Conoco. It's what's interesting is when I say mission critical space or the data, everyone knows exactly what that is. They don't have a question about it. In my orbit, even my kids, they know exactly that. That's the endpoint, or that's the computing spot for harnessing technology for the world, for
Home
the
for the
internet.
cloud.
Yeah,
Yeah.
home for the cloud. So they know this. So I'm explaining it, but I do explain it that the synergies between the military and the mission critical space is wonderful, and that Overwatch is very unique in the sense that they've taken this mission critical space, they've tied a military spin to it, which is the same. I mean, at the end of the day, all missions are critical, and the data center space is critical. We can't afford a millisecond to not be computing. You won't get your X-rays. You won't. You can't operate a hospital. You can't operate planes. The fact is, things will not operate without a data center, and our entire world will stop without data centers. So I'm just explained to them that I'm operating in a mission critical space that's required to that creates a lot of excitement.
That's interesting. I believe that what we've done is we've arrived like. A data center is the fourth utility. You could never imagine living in a home that didn't have plumbing or electricity, and I doubt that your family could imagine living in a home that didn't have connectivity. And that's the rail of the data center, right? So I think that it is a utility. I think that people intuitively understand it like that because. I mean, drive down the highway and kids don't have Wi-Fi because they're not tethered to something.
Right.
They're going to be losing their mind.
Absolutely.
But it's a utility, right? And it's still it hasn't made it to the point where it's a mainstream industry enough to where it is prevalently it's intuitive to where everybody already understands what it is. I think that we have our interpretation of what it is, because to some, it's just a server farm. It's just it's a hotel
Right.
that rents suites to businesses instead of people,
Right.
and they just stand up their cornfields inside of it, but instead they're just rows of racks instead of corn. People haven't arrived at how that's really the engine that fuels every other industry's growth. Every industry is tied to and limited to their ability to adapt and reach more more customers or make a bigger impact.
Right.
They're limited by technology, and all that technology goes back to a data center, right? So that whole narrative is, I always ask people, and I've never got two answers that are the same, but it's because the soup's not done cooking.
Right.
You get it? I don't think that it's arrived to be a mainstream thing yet to where we could all start standardizing what our interpretation of it is. Because data centers are getting much more complex too in the way that they're arriving at, a solution for high performance compute environments and, quantum computing and robotics and AI and AR and VR and all that. So when you sit down now thinking about, Joey 3.0, what's the input or the advice you'd give to that reserve kid sitting in Chicago or some other, rural urban market, doesn't matter, and they're reservists and they're trying to figure out what they want. They know they don't want to be where they're at, and anything outside of that seems like the right direction. Right. So what's your advice to that young person, the situation, Joey, the situation that's reinventing himself at 24, 25?
Regardless of their condition, they have a family, they have, they feel like they can't do something because they have paralysis around their existing situation. I would encourage individuals to have confidence that they are as good as they know they could be. And once they believe it, we always revert back to what we're bad at. And, we used to take this training class that all they did was focus on the good things that we do. And we had to identify all the great things that we do. It's hard for an individual to talk about the great things they do. It's really easy to talk about the bad things we do. We're in our relationships. Yes, we tell I tell my wife how great you are, but deep down, I really want to tell her all the bad things she does, and vice versa. And how we can fix those things. And so that's created this, from cradle to grave, negative approach or lack of confidence inside of ourselves. So I would say, listen, have the confidence that you can do. The human brain's dynamic, but we're all built the same way. I don't care where you've grown up, Chicago or in Cambridge. It doesn't make a difference. The fact of the matter is the brain's the same. God is good. He created the same system and process. You just grew up in Chicago or you grew up in a mansion in the suburbs. The fact of the matter is, have confidence, regardless of what your situation is, that you will succeed. But don't lie to yourself. Don't have hope. Don't think that you're more than what you are. So that's that straddling cocky versus confidence on that. So if you can go through life knowing that you can succeed in any mission you can do, but you can leave the ego at the door, you will be a success, period. And so that's what I would encourage. And that's a success in whatever that looks like. That could be, you want to go get a PhD. You want to go continue on with your formal education. You don't want to get educated. You want to go, you're a transitioning veteran who wants to come and immediately start in the Skill Bridge program, get certified in a few areas in the data center, and you want to be a PM in 5 years and make $180,000 a year, which, by the way, surpasses anyone with a 6-year degree like my son, who has a psychology degree that we paid a lot of money for. The fact of the matter is, it doesn't make a difference. The fact is, have confidence that you can succeed in that area. And then build a community of support around you, of mentors, people that believe in you, people that give you opportunities, people that are willing to give you advice and information. Receive that advice and information and take that as gospel. Don't listen just to listen. Take that as gospel. And those young folks, they will succeed. We're only our own enemy. We create the monsters in our mind.
I like that. That's good advice. I'll tell you, that's for those that are listening, like, I'm the type of guy that when I listen to podcasts, I have to rewind them like 20, 30 times, multiple segments, just because I want that to codify in my brain. But I agree. I think the way you described it it's a decision. I believe that I like it where everything in my life is a decision that I make. It's not like it happened, because of me. It happened because of me, because I chose, right? So that's a decision. And I think that there's a lot of people, even the younger kids, we have high school kids that the confidence is lost because they feel that what they're supposed to arrive at is a balance. And that balance is, what's the alternative to having a perfect balance emotionally? Well, one, you're either going to be too confident, cocky, arrogant, and that's the ego, or you're going to not have enough. And I don't see as many people that are overly confident and cocky running around with anxiety and depression. I do see those that lack confidence battling those things constantly. And that's what helps contribute to that negative thought cycle. And I think that we're kind of are losing from the go because people don't realize that there's no such thing as a perfectly balanced. You have to decide. Think of it from the optics of not you, but your kid. If you have a daughter, arbitrarily saying, would you rather see your daughter be too confident, or would you rather see your daughter not have enough confidence? And I don't believe there's such a thing as that third one, which is the perfect balance. And I'm sure there are those people out there, and they're the anomalies of life. But the standard is you either have not enough confidence or you have too much. And the default should be for these people, like, if you're going to be failing, fail forward, or you're too confident to where it's not that you need someone to motivate you. It's that you won't let anybody stop you from doing that. That's the level of confidence you need to arrive at. Whereas everything below the line, I feel like, is a lack of confidence. This leads to a chronic cancer of thought.
100%.
And you're allowed to be too confident and even have a little bit of an ego so that you do have confidence and believe in yourself enough to go take those risks.
Right.
Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, 100%.
And I think that you just said it in a much better way than me, which is why I'll listen to this part of the podcast twice. That's good advice. Is that advice? I mean, that seems like it transcends over just transitioning out of the military into another industry, but being a working professional God, you could have stayed comfortable in that industry you're in forever. I could stay comfortable in this industry that I'm in, I feel like, for a long time, because this industry isn't the same industry.
Right.
Mission critical isn't what it was when I started. And the way that we build data centers today isn't anything like what we used to do a year ago. And in a year from now, it'll be that much different.
Right.
Imagine, I bet you in the next, 18 months, we'll generate more information in the next 18 months than we have in the history of the world combined. Right. That's how much we change. So the industry is not the same industry, although it maintains the same title. The advice that you have is there anything, with a broad stroke to paint through that says, hey, listen, you could be, how old was Zig Ziglar when he started writing his books? He's like in his mid 60s or something like that, right? So there's a lot of people that probably measure themselves as being like too old to reinvent themselves. But the reality is like, you're not missing anything. This industry is reinventing itself all the time.
Right. Yeah. 100%. Listen, the reality is we're all built to improve. We're at first of the year. What do? We do
New Year's
goals,
resolutions,
and we sometimes fall short and we lie to ourselves because we overpromise and underdeliver, and they're not realistic. So, but the fact of the matter is we're built to improve. And sometimes we feel like we're getting into a dead-end situation where we can't improve. It's everyone else's problem, everyone else's fault. Listen, I'm a Chicago Cubs fan, and it's difficult being a Chicago Cubs fan because we fail more than we succeed. But even in that situation, I want to see them win all the time. And I'm disappointed when they're not winning. And I think that they're going to win the next year and the next year because I want them to win. And I have faith that they will win. And they did win for me in 2016, which was unbelievable, and I cried like a baby. But the point being is we're all built, either as a fan, you watch a sport, we're built to succeed. If you're in a situation where you're feeling like you're not succeeding, it's not necessarily the organization's fault. It's not necessarily your fault. You're going to have to assess your situation and make the change. And again, I don't care if you're 30, 40, or 65. If you're good and you know you're good at something, go do it. go
That's
do
good
it.
stuff. Good advice. Well, listen, let's bring it home. Last thing, is there anything that you haven't shared with people that you think is worth mentioning or noting about yourself? Or, I mean, they could reach out to you, they could approach you on LinkedIn. And I mean, what's your LinkedIn?
So
I mean,
yeah, so but I'll take the opportunity to speak organizationally. So we're pretty bullish on our foundation. So that's the one thing that we're going to be up and running. We're going to have the opportunity to grow. So that's the OVAF, which we like to use a lot of acronyms because we're similar to the military. But that's the Overwatch Veterans Alliance Foundation, and that's going to be a hugely important foundation. It's a 501c3 for Overwatch specifically, that we're going to be funding the missions that all of the veteran communities have put together. What we found is it's very difficult for organizations to do both. Raise the funds to support their passion. Passion comes first. No one says, hey, I'm going to raise money so I can fill in the blank. They say, I'm going to
help someone.
I
need money.
And that could be housing, that could be food, shelter, vocational, whatever their passion towards helping veterans are. And so we are hoping to become the financial support mechanism for the entire veteran community. So it's a V2V fund, veteran to veteran fund, that allows our mission is to encourage or enable your ability to have your mission and take less of a need to worry about fundraising and drive. So that's if you can follow this, listen to the podcast, we'll be pushing on information. So start looking for OVAF and your ability to support it. We would love that. But we think that this is going to grow into a huge organizational support mechanism for the veteran community, which all ties back to our individual purpose.
How far are you from being able to make a big announcement regarding Operation Hit?
So Operation Hit, we have an opportunity actually coming up at the end of March. So we have a great golf tournament in San Diego, which that really is going to bring home, three levels of transitioning of veterans. So you've got level one, which is Skill Bridge. So Skill Bridge, if folks don't know what that is, it's a DoD program that allows for someone who's transitioning out of the military 6 months prior to sign up for this program. They come under what we call our tribe. They're part of Overwatch. We'll do our best to place them in an environment that they find to be appealing. Could be communications, could be IT, it could be entry-level data center, operations, and so forth.
HR, finance.
It doesn't make a difference.
In the data center industry.
In the data center space or technology space, we'll try to do our best to fit these kids into and when I say kids, these are folks that are 5, 6, 7 years out of high school that are professionally trained individuals, leadership training, highly skilled folks that are ready to work in this space and produce. And so that's our level one we call Skill Bridge, because the good news is any organization that hires them, they get to use that talent for 6 months with no operational expense at all. No COG expense. It's 100% the expense of the DoD. They're paid on their existing pay grade and their benefits. The level two is someone who's already transitioning but is not quite out. So this is the 9 month out or the 3 month out veteran that would then come to our hiring event. They sit down with 20, 10, 15, depending on how many employers will be there. And then they get an opportunity to interview with those folks to be placed into an opportunity for full-time employment when they're fully transitioned. And then the third is someone who is already transitioned out of the military. Could be 6 months, could be up to a year. Someone who's looking for an opportunity that may have now gained some experience in the data center space or certifications that now would like to work in that space. So we'll have a golf outing the day before. I believe it's March the 28th is the actual date. That's a Monday, or it's March 27th. Sorry, I should have that information. But we'll have a golf outing. The OVAF will be supporting that golf endeavor, and then we will be donating $30,000 to the C4 Foundation, which is a foundation centered around the SEAL community. And then the next day is Operation Hit, which is where we put 10 to 15 employers in a room, and we run 300 qualified veterans through that process. So encourage employers to sign up for this program. You're going to get great interviews. You're going to get a great opportunity to meet some good people that have served the country. Again, don't do them any favor, okay? they're doing us a favor by working for these companies because they're great assets. So I need everyone to think this way. You're not doing anyone a favor by hiring them.
Veterans didn't join the military to make money. They did it to make a difference. And I think that when they get out, they just want to have the opportunity to make a difference again.
Right.
So I don't say that because we want to pay them anything less than to what the proportionate value is, but it's because in this industry, when there's the demand for labor is so high, what you have sometimes are divas that want to put themselves on the commodity market and get into a bake-off to see who they're going to go to, and it's typically the highest bidder. And then they realize why they don't like those jobs so much, and it's because they're not there to be fulfilled. They're there to make money, and then they get surprised that they're not enjoying themselves. But I think that these military veterans coming out, they want to just be paid fair, but they want to be in a position where they could be significantly contributing to someone else's mission.
Right. Absolutely.
Well, that's good input. And I think that what you guys and the team are going to have to do is get a steady drip of these types of things going so that we could let everyone know for the sake of the community as well as the industry.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
Is there anything else you want to mention or say before we round this thing out?
No, great talk. Excited to be part of Overwatch.
I'm glad that you're here, man. So it seems like it may have felt like for you that I felt like it took forever, but maybe you felt like we were moving at record speed. But I think it was as thorough of a time we could get to make sure that this was the right place for you. And you were the right one for us, right? And that's what you wanted, something that's mutually accretive, and I think we found it. So I'm really excited to have your passion here and your leadership here. And I know that, there's a lot of things here that you're going to be able to teach a lot of people. And I know that there's a lot of amazing people here that are going to be able to show you some things so you learn how to navigate throughout the industry a little bit easier. But either way, it's going to be an awesome year. So thanks for being here, and thanks for making the time, Joe. Thanks for your service.
Thank you.
Yeah,
thanks,
man.
Guys.